Hello, you are watching Shalom World News. I'm Marina Gosu from Washington, D.C. Here are the latest headlines from around the world. Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin has shared his concern over the recent escalation of violence in the Holy Land. Hamas militants carried out a surprise attack on Saturday, which resulted in over 800 Israeli deaths and more than 2,500 injuries. Hundreds have also perished in Israeli counterattacks on Hamas bases in the Gaza Strip. In his message, the Cardinal said his thoughts are with those in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, and the Gaza Strip. He mentioned Pope Francis's Sunday Angelus message, calling for an end to the violence in Israel. The Cardinal said that these events endanger the fragile hopes for peace that seemed to be on the horizon. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attacks by Hamas against Israeli cities and villages in the Gaza Strip. He stressed that civilians must be respected and protected at all times, and that civilian infrastructure must never be a target. The United Nations Rights Office expressed alarm that there is no procedure in place to return Ukrainian children who have been forcibly taken to Russia during the ongoing conflict. Nearly 20,000 children were taken to Russia ever since the war began in the Eastern European country. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights remains gravely concerned that there is no established system to return Ukrainian children who are transferred to other regions in Russian-occupied territory or to the Russian Federation, said UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights Neda Al-Nashif. Russia has frequently denied claims of forcibly taking Ukrainian children against their will. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Moscow's Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, has been charged by the International Criminal Court with forcible deportation of Ukrainian children. The spate of kidnappings of priests and religious in Nigeria is going on unabated, and in the latest incident, 3 nuns and a seminarian were kidnapped in the state of Imo in the southern part of the country on October 5th. The nuns belong to the missionary daughters of Mater Ecclesia of the Diocese of Abakaliki in Ebonyi State, while the seminarian is of the Missionary Sons of the Holy Trinity congregation. The incident took place while they were traveling towards Mbano to attend the funeral of the mother of one of the sisters. Gunmen also took the driver. Last month, there was a similar incident in which a parish priest was taken by gunmen on September 17th. He was later released on the 21st. It is not known if a ransom was paid to secure his release. Kidnappings are on the rise as the law and order situation in most parts of the country is in shambles, while federal authorities are doing little or nothing to stem the tide of violence. The Colorado Supreme Court in the U.S. has agreed to take up the case against a Christian baker, which has been in court for more than 11 years. The baker, Jack Phillips, who owns Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado, refused to create a customized cake for a same-sex wedding that triggered a lawsuit in 2012. The lawsuit ultimately took him to the United States Supreme Court. 6 years later, the 9 justices ruled that the state acted against Phillips' religious convictions, and the government could not force anyone to create customized works of art against their conscience or moral objections. In 2018, a second lawsuit was filed against the baker by a trans lawyer whose order for a cake to celebrate his gender transition was refused by Phillips. Now, the Colorado Supreme Court has agreed to hear his case. Jake Werner, the attorney for the Alliance Defending Freedom, defending Phillips, said the lawsuit was a setup with the intention to target Phillips and his convictions. A pregnancy care center in New York is suing 2 pro-abortion campaigners under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act. In this case, Buffalo residents and pro-abortion activists Hannah Kamke and Jennifer Page were accused of FACE Act breaches. Kamke has been accused of vandalizing the sign at Compass Care's Amherst location. According to the complaint against Page, she was charged with organizing protests in such a way that they blocked the facility's parking lot. These demonstrations have discouraged both personnel and patients from visiting the institution. Meanwhile, the CEO of pro-life organization Compass Care, James Harden, has announced legal action and expressed discontent with the government's response to protests and vandalism. Today on World Mental Health Day, the National Catholic Mental Health Campaign Novena is underway in the U.S. and will run through October 18th. The U.S. bishops published the novena, comprising a compilation of prayers, meditation, and action to help mental illness patients and honor healthcare workers, family, friends, and caregivers. The novena prioritizes mental health and marginalized groups. Every day has a different subject and follows the Pray, Learn, Act framework. The World Foundation for Mental Health's 2023 theme is Mental Health is a Universal Human Right. They hope that their novena will spark discussion on how to improve mental health care. The novena concludes on the feast day of St. Luke the Evangelist, who was a doctor and is referred to in the book of Colossians as the beloved physician. In the American state of Florida, Attorney General Ashley Moody is blocking a proposal by abortion supporters to amend the Constitution to ensure so-called abortion rights in a filing at the state Supreme Court on Monday. Moody asked the top court to review the work of the proposed amendment, which supporters hope to put on the November 2024 ballot. In the filing, Moody said she was submitting that the aforementioned initiative does not satisfy the legal requirement for ballot replacement. Moody also said she would detail her objections in a brief that will be filed later. In an opinion piece published on Florida's Voice web portal, she wrote that her opposition to the issue has nothing to do with her personal views on abortion. Instead, she said she was objecting to initiatives when the language of the summary was misleading to voters. The International Campaign for Tibet, or ICT, and various human rights organizations are appealing to United Nations member states to reject China's bid for a seat on the UN Human Rights Council. The decision on China's candidacy is scheduled to take place today. In a bold statement, the head of the International Campaign for Tibet's UN Advocacy Team and Executive Director of ICT, Germany Kai Müller, emphasized that the need for the Chinese government to face consequences for its human rights violations. Müller expressed concern over the possibility of China being granted a seat on the Human Rights Council, highlighting the potential impact on the Council's credibility. The Catholic Bishops' Conference in Sri Lanka has requested President Ranil Wickremesinghe to share reports on the Easter attacks from the FBI, British police, and the secret agencies of India, China, Australia, and Pakistan. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Sri Lanka wrote to President Wickremesinghe to point out that the president had recently spoken with German broadcaster Deutsche Welle when he first revealed that he had claimed to have received such information. 3 churches and 3 five-star hotels were the targets of the series of attacks that took place on Easter Sunday on April 21, 2019, killing 267 people, including at least 45 foreigners. The Easter trial has been clouded by criticism from the minority Christian community and the families of the victims, who claim that the government is being slow to prosecute those behind the attacks. A German historian has said that Pope Pius XII's actions did more to save Jews and to stop the killings than any politician or religious leader of his time during World War II. Dr. Michael Hesseman of Göttingen University, working for the American Pave the Way Foundation, has been researching the Holocaust since 2009, analyzing thousands of Vatican archives records. Pope Francis opened the Vatican archives in March 2020, and since then, historians have combed through and assessed hundreds of previously unstudied manuscripts. An international conference is being held at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome on the topic of new documents from the pontificate of Pope Pius XII and their meaning for Jewish-Christian relations, a dialogue between historians and theologians. New documents to be presented include a list of about 3,200 Jews hidden in religious institutions in Rome, and a letter written to the Pope's secretary, Father Lieber, describing the Holocaust. This week, the Hospitalidad Nuestra Señora de Lourdes in the Spanish capital Madrid is undertaking its 100th pilgrimage to the International Marian Sanctuary of Lourdes in France. This is a visit that sick people and volunteers have been making for decades to seek the intercession of the Virgin Mary at the place of her apparition. It was in the middle of the previous century that the pilgrimage of the sick was started by a group of women. Today, it has become an association dependent convent on the Archbishopric of Madrid that mobilizes hundreds of people twice a year. Until the 1990s, the pilgrimage was undertaken only once a year in the month of May. Since then, a second pilgrimage is undertaken in the month of October. There was a break only during the days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Initially, pilgrims from Spain traveled to Lourdes aboard the train known as the Train of Hope. Later, buses with modern amenities took its place to provide more comfort to the ailing pilgrims on the journey. Thanks to the initiative of a British Christian investment banker, an English town is on the path of revival with a museum that combines both religion and art. On October 7th, the Faith Museum opened its doors for the first time in the English town of Bishop Auckland, named after one of the most powerful clerics in the country. This museum is tasked with telling the faith of the country. The brainchild of Jonathan Ruffer, the museum highlights the birth of Christianity on the island during Roman rule, the glory of the monasteries during the medieval age, and the polarizing effects of the Reformation. Among the artifacts is an altar cover made from fragments of embroidered blue velvet, which was likely created after 1600 from vestments worn by pre-Reformation priests. There are more than 250 objects from private and personal collections across the UK. Ruffer has spent the past decade creating the Auckland Project, comprising a series of museums, galleries, parks, and other attractions to revive the fortunes of Bishop Auckland. And those are your latest headlines. Join us again tomorrow for more. You can also visit us at swnews.org for more updates. Shalom.